Let's start with a puzzle, one that I think defines so much of modern American life.
Yeah.
If you take an average Republican and an average Democrat, and you ask them what they actually want from the government on things like, say, environmental protection or infrastructure, the policy differences are, well, they're often surprisingly small.
Right, they're modest.
Exactly. Yet the hostility, the pure anger between these groups is just completely off the charts.
Yeah.
Why? Why is the temperature boiling over when the actual gap in policy is relatively manageable?
That gap you mentioned, that's the entire puzzle, and it's what Lilliana Mason tackles in her book, Uncivil Agreement, how politics became our identity.
Okay.
If this were just about tax brackets, we could debate it, we could adjust and move on. But Mason's work suggests this rage. It isn't about a failure of rational debate.
It's something else.
It's a conflict that people are experiencing as an existential threat to who they fundamentally are.
That reframes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It means the stakes are much higher than we thought. We're going to get deep into Mason's arguments today, and we want to go beyond just the simple summary.
Absolutely.
In fact, we want you to enjoy a bold new take on book coverage with this extended analysis. More than just a summary, which we also include, this feature examines how the author shapes her argument, builds influence, and earns or loses your trust.
It really gives you the tools to read with sharper insight and, I think, greater discernment.
Should you read this book? This should help. It's also excellent for aspiring writers. And if you find this expanded format valuable, we would love to hear from you. Your feedback helps guide our future content.
So let's talk about the author. Lilliana Mason is a political scientist. Her expertise is in American partisanship and political psychology.
And her credibility, her ethos, is really built on quantitative rigor, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just an opinion piece. She buried herself in the numbers, using voluminous statistical data and integrating really deep research from social identity theory to build her case.
The context here feels critical, too. The book came out during a time of intense us versus them rhetoric.
It did, but Mason's point is that events like the intense polarization we saw escalate during the Trump era, they aren't the cause.
They're symptoms.
Powerful symptoms, yes, of a much deeper societal sorting process that has been happening for decades.
And just a quick note for everyone listening, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
So who is Mason trying to reach with this book? She's really targeting politically attentive readers.
People like you listening right now.
Exactly. People who are worried about civility, but who might mistakenly assume that the conflict is mainly about rational, policy-based disagreement.
Right. The book's whole purpose is diagnostic. It's trying to inform us, to explain how this fight shifted away from the world of policy and squarely into the realm of identity.
It's a fundamental recalibration of what modern partisanship even means.
And that gets us to her central claim, right? This idea of social polarization.
Yes, and to get that, you have to understand her key concept, the mega-identity.
Okay, can you break that down for us? This idea of stacking identities sounds like the crucial mechanism here.
It is. Think back to, say, the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
You might have had a socially conservative, pro-union Democrat.
Sure.
And he might have lived next door to a moderate, mainline Protestant Republican. Their race, their religion, their culture, these things weren't all perfectly aligned with their political party.
So those other identities could pull them in different directions. It prevented this intense tribalism.
Precisely. But what's happened over the last few decades, as Mason documents with a mountain of data, is that these identities have dramatically stacked.
They've all lined up.
All lined up. So now, if you're a Democrat, you are statistically far more likely to be secular, college-educated, urban, and non-white. If you're a Republican, you're much more likely to be white, evangelical, and rural.
So the party label isn't just about my opinion on fiscal policy anymore.
Not at all. It's become a signal for this comprehensive mega identity.
And Mason shows that the emotional dislike for the other side, what political scientists call affective polarization, is just way, way stronger than any disagreement over policy can account for.
That's the key. Affective polarization is hating the people in the other party, not just disagreeing with their ideas.
I understand the observation that the parties now look like two different social groups. But does this let policy off the hook completely? Is she really saying policy doesn't matter at all?
No, not at all. The policy disagreements are still there. But Mason's argument is that they are now filtered through this powerful identity lens.
Okay.
She draws heavily on social identity theory. It's this basic psychological principle that we all sort ourselves into groups, our in-groups, and then we naturally treat the out-groups with suspicion.
So let me see if I have the mechanism right. If all these important identities, my race, my religion, my culture, are stacked onto my party, then an election loss.
Yes.
It's not just a setback for a policy agenda. It feels like a direct threat to my entire group, my entire way of life.
That's it, exactly. The stakes feel personal, they feel primal. And so zero-sum thinking takes over. If they win, my whole community, my entire worldview is under attack.
And you can feel that gravity in Mason's tone. It's very analytical, but there's this measured alarm about what this means for democracy.
Yeah. Deep concern, yes.
So now we get the mega identity and the why social identity theory. But how does she make this argument so convincing? Let's dig into her analytical playbook.
Okay.
I think she builds incredible credibility, or logos, just through the structure of the book itself.
It's a masterstroke, really. It mirrors the scientific process. She doesn't just jump to the scary conclusions.
No, she starts with the facts. She lays out the group identity theory first. Then she spends chapters just documenting the sorting phenomenon, showing you the data from decades of surveys.
So by the time she gets to the conclusion, you can't really dismiss it.
You can't, because she already convinced you the mechanism was real 2 chapters earlier. The structure itself is a form of persuasion, and her writing is so clear, so pristine, it just reinforces that sense of empirical rigor.
That clarity is a tool in itself. But I think her conceptual framing is what's truly brilliant. The terms she uses, social sorting, and especially mega-identity.
They're powerful.
They're powerful framing devices. They take decades of complex, messy data and compress it all into these memorable labels that just instantly shift how a reader sees the world.
She forces you to re-see partisanship.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not just liberal versus conservative anymore.
Right.
It's one layered composite identity clashing with another. That term, mega-identity, it successfully redefines the problem.
And that brings us to the analytical hook of the entire book, which is her constant strategy of contrast, this famous mismatch between emotion and policy.
Yes, let's really focus on that mismatch, because I think it's the most powerful takeaway for anyone trying to understand this.
It is.
She forces you to confront a simple fact. If you look at the actual party platforms, both sides broadly agree we need a strong defense, infrastructure, environmental rules. They probably agree on 80% of the basic goals of governance.
But the emotional hostility is at 100%. Total repulsion.
And she just hammers this point home again and again.
She does. She'll show data that Democrats and Republicans are actually closer on some specific issues than you'd think, but then she'll immediately juxtapose that with polling data showing massive anxiety about someone from the other party, say, marrying into their family.
That juxtaposition makes the incongruity so stark it becomes undeniable. The policy differences can't possibly explain that level of personal animosity.
So the conclusion is inescapable. Identity, not issues, is doing the heavy lifting here. You don't hate them because of their tax plan, you hate what they represent culturally.
And while the book is very scholarly, Mason is incredibly skilled at evoking pathos emotion, but she does it so indirectly, so responsibly.
This is probably a good moment to mention.
Yes. Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel, offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought.
And Mason builds that sense of urgency by systematically showing how regular people, ordinary citizens, are increasingly seeing their opponents not just as wrong, but as morally tainted.
As bad people.
Dangerous people.
Exactly. And by showing how that moral condemnation erodes democratic trust, she delivers this sort of controlled, scholarly alarm. It feels so urgent because it's rooted in data, not in sensationalism.
Right. And she makes it all so accessible. She weaves these complex statistics together with real-world stories that make the abstract patterns feel concrete.
She never sacrifices the rigor, but she makes sure every reader can follow the evidence.
So let's talk about the book's impact. It's safe to say it's been rhetorically successful.
Hugely. It really shifted the whole conversation about polarization away from a simplistic story about extreme ideology and toward this much more nuanced, identity-based account.
Many reviewers have called it one of the most important books on American politics in recent years. I'd agree. And for you, the intellectually curious reader, the payoff is immediate. That blend of theory and evidence, it just deepens your understanding of this animosity you see every day.
It makes you reflect on what it would even take to fix it.
Which brings us to the book's limitations. We should touch on those. Mason's argument is rooted very strictly in U.S. survey data.
So we have to ask, is this a uniquely American problem, this specific kind of stacking?
And that disciplinary constraint is really a feature, not a bug. It means the book is more diagnostic than prescriptive. She's not offering easy solutions or making broad global comparisons.
Which might frustrate some readers. They want the 5-point plan to fix everything.
Of course. But that intense focus is what keeps her claims so disciplined and empirically solid. The limitation is its strength.
Which really brings it all back to the relevance for you, the listener. The knowledge from this deep dive helps you read the news with so much more insight.
You see a political fight erupt.
And you can ask yourself, is this really about the policy details? Or is this just about defending a stack identity, about protecting the in-group? It forces you to find the real source of the heat.
Which leads to a really difficult final thought for you to mull over.
Go on.
If political differences are now experienced not just as differences of opinion, but as direct threats to our fundamental racial, religious, and cultural groups, our entire social existence, how can any meaningful political compromise even be possible?
How can it not feel like a total betrayal of your entire social identity? A heavy question.
A very heavy question.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Please subscribe. Share this deep dive with someone who needs this perspective. Purchase the book via the link and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.